I'm delighted to say Tom Parsons of the Gaelic Players Association is with us. Tom, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Hi Ger, hi Eoin, how are you guys?
We're back to talking about championship structures for our sins. We must have been very, very bad in a former life to be still talking about this. But at the moment, it looks like there is a very strong momentum behind the Green proposal, which Central Council voted on at the weekend, and now we expect, I would say, that a majority of people will get behind at Congress. Is that your understanding, that Green will appear and will have the support of enough people to get through this time?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of work to do. I suppose there was two proposals on offer, Green and Red, and both met the criteria for players of enhancing the development for squads, change, a pathway to success, and we're far better than the status quo. And it's positive that this time round it seems to be a little bit more alignment between players and administrators and county boards. So I think it is a really good chance, and I suppose it's very positive, Ger, that we've turned around in 4 months since Special Congress a motion or a structure that has got, nearly unanimous support from players. But there's still a lot of work to be done once delegates and county board members do a deep dive into this structure. So there's a bit of work to be done yet.
Is it as much a unanimous vote to get away from the status quo as much as anything else, Tom?
Yeah, like the debate now really is Green versus the status quo, and like Green, it got overwhelming support from the players, and I suppose the players didn't have this option in October. If it was an option in October, it would have gathered a lot of support. And like, what are we up against them at the minute? When you look at the status quo at the minute, you play the National League as you prep for championship, you play the provincial championship, and in most cases, when you look at it, 28 teams are knocked out, and fundamentally that's it. The oxygen is gone, and you limp into the qualifiers. Versus, this is a much more competitive competition, So, like, even to just give a little bit of context on Green, because we all, I think Proposal B captured our hearts and imagination because it flipped the season on the head. But I firmly believe, first and foremost, that Proposal B in October finally got home the message of the importance of the leagues, the importance of seeding and tiers, and above all, the importance of competitive games for every team. And I suppose, where did this Green proposal come from? Sean Kelly, the ex-president, outlined this years ago. So the likes of Jim McGuinness, Dara Canada, a lot of significant GA people have endorsed this plan publicly. And what it does is the leagues now really dictate the All-Ireland series, because all the Division 1 and 2 teams essentially qualify for Sam Maguire, and then the Division 3 and 4 teams qualify for the Tailteann Cup. And the provincials then, which is a quick knockout, is really a mechanism for a Division 3 or 4 team to get into Sam Maguire. So it's a wildcard chance for Division 3 and 4 team. And then the All-Ireland series, which is group stages of 4 at the start of the season, is tried and tested. It's used by most major competitions around the world. So I suppose from a player's point of view, finally, there's a link between the league and the All-Ireland series. And this is a really strong proposal for players.
Were you surprised that the support from the players was so overwhelming in favour of Green versus Red, given that Red looked much closer to the Proposal B option?
Yeah, like initially, I obviously was thinking, let's edit Proposal B, get it out on the table, and that has to be the runner for players. And I suppose they needed to alter Proposal B to get it over the line to satisfy some of the Division 1 counties, to make a link for the provincials and awarding points. And I think that compromise in Proposal B just weakened it for players. Like, so for example, nearly half the number of trophies available for players throughout the year, because you drop those league titles. And that was really important for players, because I suppose in the Green proposal, when they were looking at it, there's the opportunity to win 10 trophies. And we know that if you win a league competition or you win a provincial, it gives a team oxygen and develops teams. So I definitely think dropping the league titles put players off. And I suppose when you look at any league around the world, from Premier Leagues to NBAs to NFLs, you never really have a Premier League 1A versus Premier League 1B. You have league winners and league titles. And then I think a lot of players, when they did a deep dive into it, were spooked with provincials being awarded 2 points, and they were going through the scenario of, Dublin and Kerry and having 2 points on the board before they go into the league, and how do we catch them? And so I think players, when you looked at the surveys and we did focus groups and we talked to reps and captains, they could get their head around the Green proposal. They could understand it. They looked at it in black and white and said, okay, well, this enhances our league because it becomes more exciting. It adds an extra level of importance because it's linked to the All-Ireland Series. And now the All-Ireland Series, which is group teams, with teams playing at their own level. The Tailteann Cup winners still get guaranteed entrance to Sam Maguire the following year. So it ticked an awful lot of boxes. So Green didn't flip the season on its head and, I suppose, captured the imagination of people like Proposal B did. But from the principal's point of view, it did everything else from players. And when players looked at it, and it took a while, once players actually looked at the videos, slowly there was more momentum growing towards Proposal Green.
What killed Proposal B, many different things killed Proposal B. My fundamental belief is that the provincial councils and their soft power off Broadway killed it, because they didn't want it to happen, and they made sure that it wasn't going to go ahead. But also, what the arguments they put in were the sixth place team in Division 1, and then the other stuff was kind of it was kind of an amalgamation of different. They fought the war on many fronts, I think it's fair to say. For me, the one strength of it was that it was very clear in terms of these games result in this. We're kind of left with a bit of a hodgepodge with the Green proposal, where the provincial championships are going to be in the middle of the season, and I kind of still don't fully understand what the point of them are in the long run. Are we in danger of having a bit of a dog's dinner?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. There had to be compromise, and you're right. The provincials wanted, their competition to be front and centre, and it's not that players don't like the provincials. Players value the provincials. They just didn't want the provincials to be the ultimate link to the All-Ireland Series. So, in the current structure, if you don't really win a provincial, you're knocked out and you're going through this qualifier route. And so it doesn't serve teams well. Whereas in this structure, I know the provincials are played in the middle of the season, as in it's league, then it's provincials, then it's the group stages. But ultimately, the provincial, you don't have to win a provincial title to get into the All-Ireland Series. The fundamental championship is in that Champions League format when you go into your groups of 4. So, we could argue and say, well, the core competition is the 4 groups of 4, the Champions League format. That's number one. The second most important competition is the league. And the third most important competition is the provincials. So why aren't they played in that order? But I think fundamentally, Ger, the structure philosophy has to be right first, and then we can worry about the time of year that competitions are played at. And the provincials, and if this passes, the provincials have conceded the fact that maybe a Dublin, a Mayo, a Tyrone don't have to win a provincial title to get through to the All-Ireland Series. So they have conceded that. And I don't know, when I was looking at it, Ger, and talking to a lot of players about it, maybe we'll have more diversity of winners in the provincials, because I was even looking at Laois and Dublin last weekend. Laois really rattled Dublin. I should have beaten Dublin, and Dublin probably had maybe 60-70% of their strongest team. They still had the Brian Fentons, the Kieran Kilkennys, but Laois really rattled them. So maybe in the provincials, we'll see more diversity of winners between the National League and the All-Ireland Series. And it's no harm to have, you're going to have a gap. Currently, the gap between the league and the championship is just a void of 5 weeks, and there's nothing. So the link now between the league and the championship is a quick knockout competition, and it's positive. And I do believe that teams who win provincial competitions, they do value that medal. It is a valuable competition. They just didn't want it to be the ultimate link to the All-Ireland Series.
Okay, so it feels like we're inching towards a good solution. This might not be the good solution, really. It's a staging post along the way. Is that fair?
No, I think it is. I think it's a good solution. Players like it. When you look at it, we're comparing it against the status quo, right? So, what does it do across the whole season? we've more competitive league games because it qualifies you for the All-Ireland series. So Division 2 and 3 become brutal because teams need to get to Division 2 to get to Division 1. So the leagues become more competitive. The provincial knockout stages gets more interesting because it's an interesting dynamic whether all teams will go hell for leather for a provincial. The Division 3 and 4 teams certainly will, so it's a wildcard chance. And then the group stages, that's a tried and tested model. We've all been, every player has been crying out for years, why aren't we doing an All-Ireland series that's similar to a World Cup or a Champions League, 4 groups of 4? And why players didn't like the Super 8s is because, eight teams, it had a real elite feel because only 8 teams got the chance to do group stages. We're now 32 teams get a chance of group stages and are competing against teams at their own level. So, Ger, it is, and when players look at it, it is a positive step forward in the right direction.
It's going to be interesting to see how this one develops, especially on the provincial championship front, Tom, that if it does come out that, say, some of the top teams in Division 1 and 2 aren't taking this as seriously as some of the lesser teams who are coming from Division 3 and 4 and will take this thing as a wildcard opportunity, could that actually not be the death knell for the provincial championships, but over a period of time, if you do have your Division 1 teams perhaps not taking it as some of the lower division teams, could that be trouble for the provinces?
Yeah, well, I think this is a really good test because, when talking to an awful lot of the Ulster guys, and I think every Ulster squad backed Proposal Green, they unanimously said, we will go hell for leather for our Ulster Championship because they love it. They love that competition. Similarly with, from a personal point of view, in Mayo, the competitiveness against Galway and Roscommon to win a Connacht title is not insignificant. So I think this will test the appetite from players and teams and how much they want to win these competitions. But also, players have been crying out for more games, and this guarantees, I think, 12 games for 24 teams, because for 24 teams, they'll get 5 championship games, and it forces teams' hands to use their full squad. So teams typically have 34, 35 players, and in a normal season, because you have league, and then you essentially have every game after the league is essentially an absolute knockout game, you don't get to use your full squad. So because there's more of a link and connection between the leagues and the championship, you're going to have to use your full squad. But I think this will be a test for the provincial competitions. I still think they carry a lot of weight. And I think winning a provincial competition in the summer still has that weight, and it's still a Connacht or a Leinster final. But I do think Division 3 and 4 teams will be incentivised, and there's no doubt about it, the Dublins, the Kerrys will take their finger off the pulse, even a few percent, and you might just have more diversity of winners in the provincials. And maybe in the long run, that diversity of winners in the provincials will enhance the provincials, or maybe it'll be the opposite. Maybe we'll see the leagues take front centre of the season, and the provincials maybe being played before the league. But this is the right step. This is a step in the right direction because the leagues have been so competitive, and we needed to reward the teams that worked their way up to Division 1 and 2, and we needed to reward those teams to get into the top tier and see a pathway to success for all teams.
The one concern I would have is that the provincial championships, by the look of the draw, you could be on a side of a draw where you end up being a Division 3 or Division 4 team who make it all the way through to provincial final, and so therefore you get grandfathered into the Sam Maguire, whereas you could be a Division 2 team who finishes 4th or 5th in Division 2, in the middle of Division 2, and there could be 3 or 4 teams who use the provincial championships. Again, you would need to be very unlucky, and it's a scenario that is unlikely to happen, but there could be 3 or 4 teams who make it through the provincial route to a provincial final because the top tier teams are all on the other side of the draw. Do we think provincial championships will be seeded?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can't allow one side of a provincial draw to be all Division 1 and 2 teams, and the other side to be Division 3 and 4 teams. I think similar to Munster, where they separate Cork and Kerry, but you have to have a rule where you can't have all Division 1 and 2 teams going into the same pot on one side of the draw for fairness. like the provincials need to be a wildcard opportunity for Division 3 and 4 teams, because they haven't worked their way up the league to get to Division 2. And for them to get to a provincial final, they have to overcome a Division 2 or Division 1 team. So, like, in this structure, like, the provincials have been given and will be given the autonomy to structure their competitions as they see fit. And certainly from a player's perspective, they'll be looking to make sure that there is adequate seeding, to make sure there's more fairness in competition. But it's a point well made.
One last question: the politics of trying to get something like this through, Tom. We saw a very divisive series of arguments, and the status of the players, from my perspective, was made clear by some people in the comments they made about the value that we place on players. Was that in any way eye-opening for you, or had you come to expect it? Is that just the reality of being involved in the GPA, that you're made aware of the fact that there are lots of people within senior positions within the GAA who kind of don't really value the players as much as I think they should?
Yeah, like I think over the course of this, well, my experience with the GPA, how needed is a player's body? It's really needed. Like, we need to echo the voice of players, and Proposal B got messages home. You know, it wasn't done in vain. I fully believe it did change the mindsets of players. And I suppose after Special Congress, the one request players had was to make sure there's a proposal on Congress floor in the following February for players, and one the players backed. And in fairness to the GAA, they did get two proposals, a red and green, that players both liked. And as it is on the floor in February, what would be an absolute disaster jar is if Proposal Green doesn't get through in February for some reason. That would be a disaster, because in all this consultation, like, the one common thread is players are crying out for change. Like, they need Green to pass, because they need that route to development and success. So, you know, I think this could be, if this passes, we could have a very positive 24 months. And we have to remember, over 24 months, we'll have a split season, which has been so well welcomed from players. And if this passes, we'll have a new football structure and a new philosophy towards how leagues are valued and how you're seeded into a tier 1 and tier 2, and how there's a pathway to success. So, look, to answer your question, I think now more than ever, and in any sport, the need for a player's voice and a player's body is really strong. And look, whatever way the players, you know, want to go, if the players decided that they didn't want to favour either of these proposals, I need to champion that and just serve their voice. And in this scenario, you know, the majority of players really like Green, and we'll lobby hard for Green between now and Congress.